Welcome to Infinity News. Hit subscribe, like, and drop a comment. Today we're doing a deep dive into some really intense political drama out of California.
That's right. We're looking at a major clash, very public, between Governor Newsom and Tom Homan, who you'll remember was the border czar under the previous administration.
And it all happened against this backdrop of, well, chaos in Los Angeles.
Exactly. Protests, confrontations, quite a scene.
So our mission today is to unpack this whole situation. We'll look at the back and forth, the arguments from both sides, based on what's been reported.
We'll try to piece together the timeline, the protests, the warnings, the very defiant responses, and the legal moves being threatened. Basically cut through the noise.
Okay, let's start with that backdrop then. The situation in LA. What exactly was happening on the ground?
Well, the reports describe these pretty violent anti-ICE protests. We're talking fiery scenes, clashes with police, people apparently on wrecked cars, vehicles burning.
Not just peaceful demonstrations then.
No, not according to these descriptions. Mention of flash bombs being used, too. So a really volatile environment.
And right in the middle of all that, Tom Homan issues this warning.
Yeah, he essentially warned that Governor Newsom and the LA mayor, too, could potentially face federal charges. Said something like, "You crossed that line,"
Wow. Did he say why? What was the specific charge they might face?
He pointed to federal law, said things like trying to thwart IC operations, specifically mentioned that knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien is a felony.
Okay.
And also that impeding law enforcement is a felony. So he was framing it as potential obstruction.
That's serious language. Knowingly harbor and conceal. Yeah, directed at a governor.
It definitely raises the stakes, doesn't it? Takes it beyond just a policy fight.
So how did Governor Newsom respond to this threat of federal charges? I gather it wasn't quiet diplomacy.
No, not at all. It was incredibly direct. The quote that stands out is him saying, "Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with, tough guy."
He actually said tough guy.
That's the quote, yeah. A direct air.
Why do that? I mean, strategically, what's the thinking behind daring federal authorities to arrest you?
Well, it's high-stakes politics, right? It completely flips the script. Instead of defending, he's attacking, challenging them to escalate.
Makes them look like bullies if they do, maybe.
Yeah.
Or weak if they don't.
Exactly. It grabs headlines, rallies his base, puts the focus on him standing up to the feds. It's a way to, try and control the narrative.
Okay, so a very personal, very dramatic response from Newsom.
Mm-hmm.
What about the federal side's reaction to the overall situation, the violence in LA?
Well, beyond Homan's warning, there was the statement from the former president about deploying troops.
Troops, how many?
The number mentioned was 2,000 California National Guard troops to LA, presented as a move to restore order, support operations.
And Newsom's reaction to that, let me guess, he wasn't thrilled.
Not even slightly. He pushed back hard, said it would just make things worse. Pour fuel on the fire.
Did he accuse them of playing politics?
Yeah, he framed it as using federal power like a political weapon, basically. Not a genuine attempt to help.
And he got pretty emotional about the people affected by enforcement actions too, didn't he?
Very much so. There are quotes about, let your hands off 4-year-old girls trying to get educated, talking about people just trying to live their lives, paying taxes, being here for years. The fear, the horror.
So painting a picture of vulnerable people being targeted.
Right. And then asking, the hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. Really strong stuff.
And he doubled down on the dare to Homan.
He did. Repeated it. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go. Just kept hammering that challenge.
Okay, so that's Newsom's narrative. Federal overreach, targeting families, defiance. But Homan had a completely different take, right? How did he respond to Newsom's rhetoric?
Directly. He accused Newsom of spewing anti-IC rhetoric, especially right after the violence flared up, basically saying Newsom was fanning the flames against the agency.
And Homan defended the ICE operations themselves. He didn't see them the way Newsom described.
Not at all. He said they were arresting bad people, just enforcing laws. He mentioned a specific, serious criminal investigation on cartel financing they were working on.
So countering the targeting families narrative with targeting criminals.
Exactly. And he gave examples. He mentioned arrests during those operations of a sexual predator, gang members, someone with an armed robbery conviction.
Trying to show these weren't random sweeps.
Right, trying to demonstrate that ICE was making LA safer, removing dangerous individuals, not harassing the people Newsom talked about.
And Homan sounded frustrated that his side wasn't getting through.
Yeah, you can hear the frustration. Quoted saying something like, all you hear is rhetoric about ICEs being racist and ICEs being Nazis and terrorists, and then he directly blamed Newsom, saying he feeds that.
Wow. So, two totally opposite realities being described here.
Yeah.
One side, federal agents arresting dangerous criminals. The other, federal agents terrorizing immigrant families.
It's a stark contrast, absolutely. And it really highlights the deep divide here. They're not just disagreeing on policy. They seem to be describing completely different events based on, their own perspectives and objectives.
And this wasn't just talk. Newsom planned legal action.
Yes. He announced plans to file a lawsuit against the former administration, aiming specifically to block that deployment of National Guard troops.
On what grounds? What was the legal argument going to be?
Lack of coordination. He argued that the federal government needed to coordinate with the state governor before deploying the Guard like that.
And he claimed they didn't.
Explicitly.
Yeah.
Said they never coordinated with the governor of the state. So the lawsuit was framed as a challenge to federal overstep on procedural grounds, basically violating state coordination requirements.
And his language describing the federal actions, pretty strong, wasn't it?
Extremely. He used terms like authoritarian tendencies, command and control, all about power and ego.
So framing it not just as illegal, but as fundamentally undemocratic.
That's clearly the message, portraying it as federal heavy-handedness, ignoring state rights and cooperation. It really elevates the conflict beyond just troops or immigration into a fight about, the balance of power between state and federal government.
It really ties into those ongoing tensions, doesn't it? Especially around immigration, where federal law and state realities often clash.
Absolutely. It brings up fundamental questions about federal supremacy versus state sovereignty, particularly when federal enforcement happens on state ground. Newsom's move, framing it as resisting authoritarian tendencies, taps right into that deeper conflict.
So putting it all together, the dare, the troops' threat, the clashing stories about ICE arrests, the lawsuit.
Yeah.
It's a multi-level confrontation.
It really is. You've got the war of words, the actual events on the ground, protests, arrests, and then this looming legal battle, all interconnected, all very high stakes.
It just shows how intense these clashes can become when you have such fundamental disagreements playing out.
And how quickly things can escalate from policy disputes to, personal dares and constitutional challenges.
So as we wrap up, it leaves you, the listener, in a tricky spot, doesn't it? You've got these powerful figures presenting completely contradictory versions of events. One says necessary enforcement against criminals. The other says authoritarian attacks on families. Based purely on what we've discussed here, how do you navigate that? How do you find the truth when the basic facts themselves are so hotly contested by the people involved?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The material lays out the conflict, the opposing narratives, but it doesn't give you an easy answer. It really forces you to think critically about why each side is framing the story the way they are, what their goals might be, even if the accounts seem impossible to reconcile. It's about understanding the conflict itself.
Definitely a lot to think about there. Thanks for breaking it all down.
My pleasure. Always interesting to unpack these situations.
Thanks for tuning in to Infinity News. Hit subscribe, like, and comment. See you next time.